So good morning. A couple of things. Number one is, next week, what I do with it? Next week, I need y'all to bring some dollars. These are 20, so you don't have to bring those. But you need to bring some dollars and some quarters and some nickels and some dimes. And when y'all saw those kids running up here putting money in the basket, next Sunday morning, I want to see how long we can keep them running and bringing money to the front. And all the money we collect goes to the Tennessee Children's Home. So just next week, bring your quarters and your nickels and your dimes and your dollars. And the longer they run, the less I preach. So, so I don't know if that's any incentive or not, but I like it. I want to bring lots of quarters. Hey, the other thing is, and I just thought about this. I thought about this when I saw that title on the song, Prince of Peace. Do you know that there are so many different versions of that? Like we didn't get the right one up there. And Olivia Merritt, I don't know if she's here today or not, but that's one of Olivia Merritt's favorite songs. And every time she says, "I want to sing Prince of Peace," Greg, I sing. Y'all remember the old one? Prince of Peace, control my will. And it's like, y'all, I mean, that was the old time Prince of Peace. So I think one Sunday we just need to sing every version of Prince of Peace. And so we can get them all up there at one time. Anyway, that's my two commercials for the day. Leaving Egypt. So last week we talked about Moses, who was chosen by God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And we talked about his planning and his timing. We talked about Moses at 40 and Moses at 80. At 40, Moses kind of had the right plan, but he had the wrong originator of the plan, and God formed Moses and gave Moses the gifts that he needed to lead them out of Egypt. The week before that, we talked about how the Israelites got to Egypt to begin with, and we talked through that. And this week, I want us to talk about the 10 plagues and the gods of Egypt. So when you look at the 10 plagues, there's this kind of overriding theme that happens in the 10 plagues in Egypt. And I think it's also connected back to Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2. So we'll connect those things together for you this morning. But God wanted to demonstrate in the 10 plagues that He is God of God, Lord of Lords, and that there's this phrase that God keeps using in the Old Testament, that you may know that I am the Lord. So even if you go back to Genesis, and first, we'll go the way the slides go. I'll try to keep up with them. So in Exodus chapter 3, when Moses says, well, if I say that I've come to deliver you, and they ask, well, who sent you? What should I say? Well, I mean, what's your name? And God said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name by which I am to be remembered from generation to generation. So God wants them to know exactly who He is. And God's name, it's a really unique kind of name. You know, when we read in some of our English Bibles, we'll read the word Jehovah. Has anybody ever heard the word Jehovah? And Jehovah is a good name that we have in our translations. I'm not against it in any way. But when you got to the name of God in the text, most people would not pronounce the name of God because they were afraid they would take the name of God in vain. So when you got to, it's called the Tetragrammaton. It's 4 Hebrew consonants. It's Yod, He, Vav, He. And sometimes now we, as English-speaking people, we will say Yahweh. But if you were Hebrew and you were reading the text, you would not pronounce that name. So when you got to that name, you would say Adonai, which is a Hebrew word that means my Lord. So when they put vowels with the Hebrew consonants and they got to Yod, He, Vav, He, they were thinking, well, what vowels do we put under that? Because we don't really pronounce that very much. So to Adonai, and they put the vowels from Adonai under Yod, He, Vav, He, and when you transliterate that, guess what you get? Jehovah, which is an okay name, but God wants them to know that I am the Lord your God. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And I want you to hang on to that verse because I want to come back to it in a minute. But that was probably the first thing that Moses ever wrote. And we want to talk about why he wrote that. So when Moses comes to Pharaoh, you remember Pharaoh says, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." From that point on, in that Exodus story, one thing that God is so intent on is he wants them to know who he is. So at the end, they would know that he was the Lord their God. So when you start thinking about the 10 plagues, a lot of people, as they build their structure around the 10 plagues, they say, well, the 10 plagues were directed toward 10 gods in Egypt. Now, that may be. It is very possible. The interesting thing about it is in the text, it never says that a particular plague is directed toward a particular god. So what you do is you start reading about all of that and you start looking at scholars' lists. Now, there are people who are Egyptian scholars who are like way, way smarter than I will ever be. So I use their list, okay? But here's the thing I think is interesting. When you start reading lists of which Egyptian god that was supposed to be about, not every one of them has the same list. Have you ever thought about that? So we're just going to go through it really quickly and I'm going to tell you what I'm trying to accomplish. Well, you've got water to blood. Well, maybe that was against Hapi. He was the god of the Nile and the god of fish. Osiris, the Nile River was the bloodstream of Osiris. So maybe it was against Osiris. Or Isis, you've heard of her. She's the goddess of the Nile. Maybe water to blood was against them. Then you get frogs. So you got Hecate. Hecate was a goddess of fertility, and Hecate had the head of a frog, and Hecate was considered to be the god of the frog. So was maybe that plague directed against Hecate? There was the plague of gnats. I'm not going through this fast. If y'all want a PowerPoint to this, you can get it later, okay? We don't have time for that. So you got Geb. Geb is the god of the earth. And Geb is even god over the dust of the earth. But Seth was the god of the desert, and he was the god of storms. So maybe they connected to that. You had the plague of flies. You had Kelpri, the god of creation, and the god of the morning sun. And actually, that god had a head of a fly. It would look like a scarab beetle kind of head that he had. Or Vachi is the fly god, so maybe it was against Vachi. And then you got the death of the livestock, right? There's Hathor. She's the goddess of love and beauty and music and dancing and fertility and pleasure. And guess what? She's got the head of a cow. You know, and you think about love and beauty and the music. Wait a minute. And you got the horns of a bull, right? And you got Apis, who's the god of fertility and the god of the underworld. And Apis is the primary bull god in Egypt. Looks like a bull. And the most revered bull deity in all of ancient Egypt. Well, then you get the bulls, right? We're going through the 10 plagues. Isis, she's the god of medicine and of peace. Maybe it was against Isis. Or Sekhmet, the goddess of epidemics. You know, she was supposed to keep all the epidemics away. Amenhotep was the god of healing. So maybe it was that he was more powerful than the god of healing. There's hail that came from the sky. You know, the next plague. Nut is the goddess of the sky. And her father is Shu. And he's the god of wind and war. And Set's the god of storms. Y'all getting confused yet? And then you got locusts. Well, Set, he's the god of storms and disorder, and the locusts came, and Neper and Nepet, they're the god and goddesses of grain. So why didn't they protect the grain that the locusts destroyed? And men is guard of the harvest, so maybe it was against men because the harvest was destroyed. And then darkness. Well, the most revered god in Egypt was Re. He was the sun god, so if you're more powerful than light, and you can bring darkness, and you're more powerful than Re, the sun god, and he's the most worshipped and revered in Egypt. Well, then you got the death of the firstborn. But did you know that Pharaoh is also considered a god? And Pharaoh is the intermediary between the gods and the people, but he himself is a god, and Pharaoh's not even as an intermediary, a god himself, able to protect his own family against the Lord who came to say, I am the Lord your God. So when you look at that list and you're thinking, man, what in the world? Were they really against 10 different gods? No, probably not. Probably not. That's probably not the way that it worked. So what's God trying to accomplish? Do you know that in Egyptian theology, there are over 2,000 different deities? That's why everybody's list is different. There are multiple gods over multiple things. There's a god of this and a god of that and a god of this thing, and there's a god of the trees and a god of the air and a god of the sun and a god of the moon and a god of the stars. There's a god of the plant and a god of the flowers. There's a God who watches over the Nile, and the God who brings flooding, and the God who brings the drying out after the flooding. And so you've just God after God after God. And for 430 years, they have been exposed to Egyptian theology, to Egyptian thought. They've seen Egyptian temples and Egyptian sacrifices. They've heard about the God of this and the God of that. And then the one true God comes to rescue them. And they've worshipped plants and trees and animals and rivers and streams. And for 430 years, they've heard about all of these gods that control all of these things around the world. And Moses comes along and he says, no, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God has come to rescue you. Now, the first thing I think Moses wrote was Genesis 1 and 2. And I don't really know when Moses wrote Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. I don't know when he wrote the book of Genesis. I think there are two real good possibilities. One real good possibility is, remember from Moses last week, so at 40 years old, he decides he's going to rescue the people by his own plan. That doesn't work out, so he goes to the wilderness, and he's a shepherd in the wilderness for 40 years, and while he's out there, when he spends 40 years there, and after that 40 years, he sees the burning bush, and God sends him back to Egypt. You got that? So in that 40-year period, maybe that's when Moses sat down and wrote, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Maybe it was after crossing the Red Sea and the people rebelled and they had 40 years wandering in the wilderness. Maybe during that 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, Moses sat down and wrote, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I think what God was trying to accomplish in that was not to give us some scientific explanation of how the world came to be. I don't think Genesis 1 and 2 is designed to be a science book. I think what Genesis 1 and 2 is designed to do is to show a group of people who have come out of captivity that all of a sudden they have been worshiping everything you can think of, and God says no matter what you worship, no matter what you think is most important, no matter which God you thought was the greatest, or in your, they had a whole genealogy of gods. This God begat this God who begat this God, and they had all these branches that came off of it, over 2,000 gods all in that system. And he says no matter what you've heard or what you've seen, there is only one God, and I am the God who created the heavens and the earth. You see all of that stuff everybody else and those Egyptians are worshiping? Every one of those things, where did they all come from? Y'all can answer, it's okay. God, in Genesis 1 and 2. It wasn't that there were multiple gods or different gods or lesser gods. There's one God. So when you start reading about the 10 plagues, I just want to read these to you, okay? I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. This is to the Israelites. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the yoke of the Egyptians. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring the Israelites out of it. This is what the Lord says. He's saying this to Pharaoh. By this you will know that I am the Lord. Moses said, it will be as you say, that you may know that there is no one like the Lord our God. Or on that day I will deal differently with the land of Goshen where my people live. No swarms of flies will be there, so that you will know that I am the Lord in this land. When I have gone out of the city, Moses said, I will spread out my hands in prayer to the Lord, and the thunder will stop, and there will be no more hail, so that you may know that the earth is the Lord's. But I know that you and your officials still do not fear the Lord God. And then God says that you may tell your children and grandchildren how I dealt harshly with the Egyptians and how I performed my signs among them, that you may know that I am the Lord. But among the Israelites, this is at the death of the firstborn, not a dog will bark at any man or animal. Then you will know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. But I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites did this. And then finally, God says, the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen at the crossing of the Red Sea. 430 years. They'd worshiped everything that had been created. They had seen it. They had watched it. They had grown up in it. Generations. And God shows up and brings them out. And one of the first things we find out after the Exodus is beliefs and thoughts are hard to change. Because do you remember? Moses goes up to the mountain to get the law of God. He's up there a long time. They grow impatient. They take all of their jewelry and throw it together, and they make a golden calf, and what do they say? These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. And we look at that and we shake our head and we think, really? I mean, after everything that God did, after God saying so many times, look, I'm doing this so you'll know I'm the Lord, after seeing 10 plagues, after maybe, I don't know if they had the Genesis story to read, I don't know if Moses had written it or not, but at least they probably knew. After all of that, and seeing all of the miracles, can you imagine walking between the walls of water in the Red Sea? And you walk through that on dry ground, mind you. Or you've seen the pillar of God as He's led you. You've seen the cloud and you've seen the pillar of fire at night. You saw God put a wall of fire between you and the Egyptians while He parted the sea. You've seen all of those things. You've seen God make a distinction between the Egyptians and the Israelites in the land of Goshen when He sent the plagues. You just lived through the death of the firstborn. I mean, you just saw it with your own eyes. And you're not 2 weeks out on the journey, and what do you say? Oh, no, here's your gods. It's this little calf that we made. You know, we created it. We shaped it. We formed it. We took our own jewelry to make it. You know, it's really precious. Look at that thing. Isn't it great? And you wonder, like in Isaiah and later in prophets where God says, why are you worshiping something that can't walk or talk or speak, that it can't even get to from one place to another unless you put it on a beast to carry it. It doesn't have any capability at all. And they keep going back and worshiping those things over and over and over. Because old habits are hard to break. And we read a book like Exodus and we stand up and we say, well, you know, we don't have gods like that. We don't have anything sitting on our mantle over the fireplace, or we didn't take all of our jewelry this morning and everybody take our earrings and rings and melt them all down, and we didn't build us some little idol somewhere, and we didn't put an idol in a place, and, you know, and we're not looking at some temple somewhere. And, you know, we're not worshiping the God of trees and rivers and bushes and beetles and frogs. And, you know, we're not doing those kind of things. But then we stop because idols in our hearts are more dangerous than idols in our homes. Idols that we can't see sometimes are more dangerous than those that we can see. And so Jesus comes along with this really unique kind of teaching, and He says things like this. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder and adultery and sexual immorality and theft and false testimony and slander. And we look at something like murder and we're saying, well, man, that's really bad. We make sure we don't do that. But I'm sure nobody ever dealt with rage or greed or one of those things that we knock like a little further down the list. But the real problem with that is not the greed or the rage. I think those are the effects of what's really happening, and the question is what's really happening in our heart. Do we really know that the Lord is God. That everything else is secondary. Everything else is not God. It's not Lord. It's not King. So then Jesus comes along in his teaching. You know, one time he taught about eating things, and there was a group, Pharisees, you're not supposed to eat certain things. Certain things make you unclean. And Jesus said, it's not what goes into you that makes you unclean. It just passes through the body. For the good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For out of the overflow of his heart, his mouth speaks. Now, have you ever stopped and just kind of stopped at that verse for a second and thought, boy, let me ask this question first. Has your mouth ever spoken something that you wish it hadn't have spoken? You know, have you ever been like, you remember the Andy Griffith episodes where he'd like to take the words and put them back in his mouth? Ooh, I'd like to put them back. After they come out, they don't go back, do they? Where does that come from? Oh, man, I was just mad. Okay, where does it come from? It comes from our heart. And then when we start looking at our heart, we start having to ask a really tough question. Is what is God in our heart? Is it an idol? Is it something else? Is it ourselves? If we were to look at our hierarchy of the things that are most important and the things that we worship, where do you fit on that plateau compared to where God is? Are you level? Or is God really God? So sometimes it's not the idols that are in our homes that create the problem. It's the idols that are in our hearts. Sometimes it's not the ones that we can see. It's the ones that we can't see that create so many problems for us. So that makes me ask a couple of questions. And what I'm talking about, I think, is just as evil as what the Egyptians did. Anybody taking a pause this week when they've seen banks collapse? Anybody just kind of stopped and think, you know, it's probably not great that a bank collapses. And just asking, has anybody this week thought, I wonder if my money's safe? My money okay? Well, can we trust in financial and institutions and government bailouts more than we trust in God? We could. We could say, oh yeah, everything's going to be good. Government's going to take care of me. Well, probably not, by the way. But maybe they will. But the question is, where's your trust? Where's your financial stability, your peace of mind? Trust in health professionals? Yeah. I mean, let's just be honest. Anybody been to the doctor in the last month? It's okay. I went, got my checkup. Was it last month? Might have been the month before. Went and got all my blood work done, figured out what was going on, made sure I was healthy. They came back and said, man, everything's good. Is everything good? Well, they think so. You know, I kind of think they're probably pretty good. If I have an ache or pain, am I okay going to the doctor? Yeah, I'm going to go ask, hey, Dr. Whitfield, what's going on, man? I got this kind of ache, got this kind of pain. He's going to say, well, either this is going on or we'll send you to a specialist. Is that where my trust is? Well, not really. Not really. Now, I know they'll keep me alive as long as they can, won't they? But they do have a limit, right? They can only keep me alive so long. There's only one that's going to keep me alive forever. So where's my God? Where's my trust? Where's my hope? Man, give us today our daily bread. We struggle with that verse as Americans anyway, because most of us have enough stuff in our refrigerator we can probably last for at least a week unless the electricity goes off. Now, if electricity goes off, you're on your own, right? You've got to find somebody that likes to can, and those people are going to be like high priority people. You've got to get to their house first because they're going to have a long line. Don't come to our house. We don't can. All right, we're going to be looking for somebody else like you are. But you look at that and you think, where are you going to get your daily bread? Where do you get your daily provision? Well, I got a job. Okay. Is that where your trust is? Is that where all your hope is? Now, I'm not telling you not to go to work tomorrow, because if a man won't work, he shouldn't eat, right? So let's keep that verse in perspective. But that's not where your trust, that's not where your hope is. The thing is, I came so that you would know that I am the Lord your God. the question is the Lord your God? Or, in a way that's similar to the Egyptians but different, are you chasing everything else in the world like it is the God and it's the most important thing, or that's where your trust and your security is, and you're missing God's point? Because at the end of the day, God says, I am the Lord. Whether it's 10 plagues, whether it's God's description of creation, whether it's Genesis and it's where man came from. And we so much want to make ourselves the center of the universe. And I just want you to know we are not. No matter how many times we say it, or how many times we write it in a textbook, or how many times we try to educate people about it, we are not the center of creation. We're God's crown of creation, but the source of creation is God. It's for His glory and His purpose, and that's what you're for. So I wonder, sometimes when I read through the 10 plagues, I ask, am I really getting the message? And are we looking for ways in the world that God works for His own power and His own glory? Just a challenge. Don't take it too far, and don't make too much of it, but just a challenge. How often do you pray to God that you don't ask for anything for yourself? You just ask for God to display His own glory and His own power, no matter what that looks like. And maybe that's something that we should spend time doing. I can't answer that question for you. I have enough trouble answering this question for myself, to be honest with you. But we have to ask, what are your gods? And if it is not the Lord your God, if He is not the Lord, if He is not the center, then please, please make Him the center of your life. You need to respond in some way.